A New Hope, Nier Chapter 89. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of Azazyel's stories. Weiss the Schnee princess was soon defeated by Vale's farmer girl Jeanne, who although wasn't the greatest in combat was most certainly not a petite little beauty like Weiss. That and she had 7 other siblings to wrestle and fight with as she grew up. Weiss had zero chance against Jeanne. "Get your udders out of my face or I am going to bite you," Weiss finally yelled as she fell slack in Jeanne's arms as she couldn't manage to pull off my hoodie from the blonde-haired girl. Jeanne quickly let Weiss go, who took a deep breath and threw a glare at the sheepish form of Jeanne, who tossed her long blonde hair back behind her back from a bit of wrestling that pulled some hair she kept in a long braid loose. "Weiss, I need to give you some hand-to-hand combat training, that was just pitiful. And Jeanne, good work taking advantage of your size differences," Pyrrha said jokingly as she pointedly looked at Jeanne's large breasts, and the blonde blushed slightly at her partner's joking. "Ugh, I hate booby smothers. It should be like an illegal move in wrestling," Ruby complained as Weiss came back over to me for a hug before she went into the trailer to take the first resting period. I gave Ruby a look at her complaint, and I could only recall the rambunctious form of Yang Xiaolong, who was a frontal combat fighter that was a superb hand-to-hand combatant. And Ruby was a poor little sniper who liked to fly around with her scythe. So, to say the least, when Yang got her hands on Ruby, the only outcome was pure bullying for the little Reaper. Anyway, 2B, how goes the rocket preparations? I asked 2B, who stilled as she remotely asked the operator units for a progress report. ETD is 30 minutes for the first rocket. But it's projected that the noise and magical energies used in the first rocket launch will heavily attract the surrounding Grim. So be prepared for such things, as the first wave will likely be the worst as it attracts all Grim in the vicinity. 2B explained, earning nods of understanding all around. Thus, for the next while, we just relaxed in the crow's nest for Ruby and Pyrrha to snipe the Grim off of. "So, Jake, what even is your semblance anyway?" Pyrrha asked me, and I frowned as I wasn't exactly sure. I could use it to almost teleport short distances, stop the momentum of things, and other stuff, but I don't know the core concept of my semblance yet. "I'm not sure, I think it's something spatially related, but honestly I don't know." "Here, throw a very slow punch at me," I asked Pyrrha, who raised an eyebrow, and with deliberate slowness, she stood in front of me and sent a comically slow jab at me. But in an instant, she stopped her motion and her eyebrows creased together as her muscles flexed. As I used my unknown semblance to change the current state of her moving into having her motion stopped. See, I could internally feel the motion of her being in a state of movement, and by using my semblance I was able to close the space between her being in movement and instead not moving at all. I pointed out before cutting off my semblance use, as it was draining my aura, keeping Pyrrha's struggling form in place. As I let go, her fist rocketed toward my chest as she seemed to desire to complete the motion, maybe out of some kind of competitive motive, but I again activated my semblance, and I closed the space between her motion going forward and instead moved her momentum to go backwards. Pyrrha was forced to do a whole backflip to control her sudden backward momentum, and as her bronze-colored heels scratched across the stone platform she just grinned at me, pushing her aside as she just saw it as another hurdle in her pursuit of defeating me as her new rival or something. Pyrrha, for all of being a great fighter, actually disdained using her semblance to her fullest potential due to it being cheating or something against her fellow fighters, which made sense as she could rip most people's weapons out of their hands with her control over magnetic poles and throw them out of the stadium, which would end up rendering most fighters helpless. Either way, she seemed to find me as a sort of rival due to me beating her around as I barraged her with magic from a distance and made janky portals with my semblance that could send any bullets she shot at me into her back out the end of the other portal I could open. Having shown off my actual semblance, I frowned as I wondered if Jeanne had the same semblance her Jeanne counterpart would have had. In being aura augmentation, which could help recover other people's aura, healing others, as well as being speculated as being capable of boosting other people's semblances to a higher level due to her own soul pushing at the other semblance. "Jeanne, come here, I am curious about your own semblance," I asked, and Jeanne blinked in surprise as she was kind of moping at being the only one without a semblance. Hell, she had 4 weird shotguns integrated into her shield because Ruby literally stole her weapon after she fell asleep and made it actually viable in the school. As everyone had been bullying her for being the only idiot trying to run people down to chop them up with her sword. Jeanne gave me a gimlet eye as she spoke wryly. "Jake, you know I haven't found my semblance yet, so what do you want me to even do?" In response, I merely took her hand and placed it against my chest. "Let's see how your aura reacts to mine at least." "I mean, I was the one who awoken your aura, so it should be fine." I spoke smiling softly as Jeanne's face turned pink at the memory that I reminded her of. Yeah, I slept beside her that night as her very soul called out to my own and wouldn't have turned me down should I have pressed her for it. Hell, she most certainly wouldn't have hated it either, as Melanie or Malanie from back in Vale had no problem with me after Melanie got aura hooked to my own soul, as it so far eclipsed her own that she was the one who got addicted to my aura. Kinda made me wonder if that's how Pyrrha fell for Jeanne in canon, as his aura was stupidly thick with how his semblance boosted his own aura to ridiculous levels naturally. But before my thoughts could further stray, I felt the soft white light of Jeanne's aura, her very soul fill my body, and I was right on all accounts of her semblance. Not only could I feel my aura regenerating, but I could my semblance more clearly than I ever could. Whereas Ruby described hers as moving a third leg as she was already sprinting to get super speed. Or Pyrrha with hers being squeezing magnets together mentally to take control of other magnetic objects. Mine was far more obscure, as it was almost like a mental space between the target in my sight and whatever I wanted it to become or do. With my aura being used to force the concepts to and for in the space between. But with Jeanne's soul literally, like an angel hanging on my shoulders with her form pushing against my back and filling me with her strength, I could see and feel so much more, and thus with a mental flex of will a far more stable portal than usual opened in front of us, and behold. All the girls except for Jeanne gasped as in front of us was our damned beacon dorm room. And I finally understood what the hell my semblance was. I was a discount Yukari Yakumo with control over the gaps between concepts.